Wanna play?
Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play?
Wanna
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wanna Play. My name is James McKenna, and today we've got yet another collaboration top 10 list. Today's list, we are going to be counting down our top 10 favorite Stephen King movies. Today we're joined by a guest who has never been featured on my channel before, but I'm sure as time goes on will be featured more and more, and that is the man who goes by Mr. Doyle, a great UndertaKIng. Now, his channel isn't exactly a horror channel necessarily, it's more of a Stephen King channel, so he covers everything Stephen King. The books, the movies, the miniseries, the musicals. Yep, there's musicals. There's a Carrie musical. It exists. And when I mean everything, I mean everything. Like, he's the only person on YouTube that I've seen do a Firestarter Rekindled review. So, yeah, if you're into Stephen King, absolutely go check his channel out. It is super underrated, and it's honestly got some of the most entertaining video executions that I've ever seen. So much so that I knew I needed to have him as a guest on this channel to count down our top 10 favorite Stephen King movies. So, without any further ado, let's get straight into it.
Hi there, my name is Mr. Doyle, and my channel is called A Great UndertaKIng. On my channel, it's all Stephen King-based content all the time, so check me out here on YouTube if you like Stephen King, obnoxious rants about bad movies, and just so much profanity. James, thank you for having me here at Wanna Play and for hitting me up for this collab video. I'm stoked to have a chance to work with a fellow horror freak and to count down my top 10 Stephen King movies, which turns out was much harder to put together than I had anticipated. So while I may not have these in just the right order because it was so hard to narrow it down, these are the top 10 King movies for me.
So our lists are going to be a little bit different because I'm a horror-focused channel and he's a Stephen King-focused channel. So my list is going to be of my top 10 favorite Stephen King horror movies, and his list is going to be the top 10 best Stephen King movie adaptations in general. So, you know, stuff like Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, Stand By Me are all just classic movies that would 100% be on this list. But since I'm a horror channel, I decided to just make my list featured just on his horror film adaptations. So my number 10 pick is going to be The Mist. This movie right here is one of the most gut-wrenching, small-scale movies that you could ever watch. It's from 2007, and it follows this group of people that are just captured in this little tiny grocery store, while outside, just the whole store is surrounded in mist, and all it is just these crazy giant creatures that are like towering over everybody, and as soon as they get their hands on somebody, they're dead. Like, it's almost like a bunch of Cloverfield monsters running around in the mist. And it gets to some crazy scenes. Like, you'd think with a premise like this, just a bunch of people just hunkered down in a grocery store for 90 minutes, it wouldn't be the most entertaining thing in the world. But then you throw in characters like Miss Carmody, who's genuinely one of the most annoying and hateable characters that you just want to see die, combined with all of these other characters that are really interesting, really unique, and stand out a lot. Plus, of course, that just iconic, shocking ending. Just all in all, this is a great movie. It's not perfect, but in my opinion, it is definitely a good enough and a worthy enough adaptation to make a spot on my list.
Number 10, Cujo. While this movie doesn't manage to capture the level of human struggle and the depth of the characters that the book does, the feature-length film adaptation of Cujo is one of my favorite 80s King adaptations for a number of reasons, but it stands out for one reason in particular. When Cujo is attacking the car trying like hell to get at Tad and Donna Trenton, their performances are incredible, Their fear, their desperation, their complete and total panic is so believable. They are absolutely losing their shit. And while this isn't a flawless film, by the time it ended, I was fully invested. Now, the ending isn't nearly as devastating and dramatic as that of the book, but honestly, I don't know if I could have even handled it had they stuck to the ending of the original story. I mean, I am convinced that the actors Danny Pintora and Dee Wallace legit thought they were going to die. It is fucking intense.
Coming in at number 9 is going to be 1922. Now, this is a little bit of an underrated movie from Stephen King because it came out in 2017 when there was like a massive influx of King movies. Of course, Gerald's Game came out around this time, and it, of course, just smashed the box office and everybody was going to see it. But this one manages to stand out because of its unique premise and I think its central performance by the father in this film. It shows a family who live in this like old, boarded up pretty much farmhouse just out in the middle of nowhere. There's like massive, cornfields all around them and stuff, and the mother and father just constantly bicker and they can't figure out what to do with their money and stuff. So the father plots to kill the mother and gets the son in on it, and they do it successfully. But then slowly throughout the movie, it just starts eating away at them, just the guilt, and they just start falling apart as people, and every time someone comes over, they just get more and more nervous. But what truly makes this stand out is just like the creepiness of how they use the rats, because they pretty much killed this woman, threw her down a well, killed an animal, put the animal down the well with her, and so every now and then it would cut back and it would just show her corpse and she'd just be rotting and there'd just be rats everywhere. It's almost like Zelda in Pet Sematary. It's like she's not the main focus, but as soon as it cuts back to her, it's some of the most memorable and creepy stuff you'll ever see. And honestly, this is a great adaptation of a Stephen King short story, and for me, I think it belongs on my list.
Number 9, Apt Pupil. While this isn't really a horror movie, it is horrific in its own right. The premise of Apt Pupil is uniquely messed up, and the King story it is based on is just so dark and demented. I admittedly had a hard time with the fictionalization of the Holocaust and the Nazi atrocities at first. It made me question the moral implications of using such tragedies as the basis for fictional stories and characters, but that moral quandary doesn't make this movie any less impactful. This wasn't a critically acclaimed movie or a box office triumph by any means, but the performances, score, and overall experience is a memorable one. I almost didn't put this movie on here because the director, Bryan Singer, is allegedly a fucking monster, but Brad Renfro and Sir Ian McKellen deserve some recognition for their performances. So while Bryan Singer can eat an entire mountain of my ass, Renfro and McKellen are what made this movie so damn good.
Coming in at number 8 is going to be Cujo, a fairly simple story about a dog who gets bit by a rabid animal and pretty much just goes crazy. It's this massive Saint Bernard dog named Cujo, and he gets bit and gets rabies and pretty much just starts killing people. But that's not the whole story, because the movie comes to a halt about halfway through when this kid is in a car with his mother, and the dog is just surrounding the car, and that's the rest of the movie. And it's so small scale. Like The Mist was small scale because they were trapped in a shopping market, but in Cujo, it's just these two people trapped in a car, and they slowly, they run out of water, they run out of food, and the kid just slowly just starts to overheat. And pretty much, like, it's creepy, like, the stuff that the kid manages to do. Like, he's a very effective child actor, and this dog, that, like, they can't really do anything, because if they open the door, the dog is gonna run in and just tear them limb from limb. So it's honestly a really good story, and you'd think, again, like The Mist, you'd think that it would be slow because it's such a small scale story. It pretty much just takes place in one parking space. But just the central performances by the two main characters and just how they slowly just start to lose it in there, it really holds up, and I really think that this is a good movie. So for me, at number 8 is going to be Cujo.
Number 8, The Shawshank Redemption. This is one of those movies that, upon its release, transcended the confines of what audiences had come to expect from King movies. Much like the story it is based on, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, the movie proved once and for all that King could not be pigeonholed as merely a schlocky horror author. Of course, any constant reader could have told you that, but for the general public, Shawshank was an eye-opener that allowed King's stories and his aptitude as a writer to be taken more seriously. The movie wasn't a blockbuster success by any means when it first hit theaters, but over the years it has garnered the critical acclaim that it deserves. Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman provide powerful, memorable performances. The film was made in an actual prison, so the setting and scenery are absolutely perfect, and Frank Darabont's direction is masterful. The Shawshank Redemption is a near-perfect movie, and while it's not necessarily what King fans are looking for in regards to genre, this movie brought King's work to a broader audience, which was beneficial to his career, reputation, and legacy.
At number 7 is going to be Firestarter. Now, this movie isn't perfect, and I actually even debated maybe putting the remake on this list as well, because I thought that the remake was pretty good too. But I had to put the original on here because I know a lot of people don't like it, but I honestly found it to be pretty compelling. I just like how it's not really structured like a normal movie. It kind of starts out with them already on the run, and then it goes into this, pretty much like laboratory as, these people are trying to experiment with Charlie's pyrokinesis, and then she slowly just gets more and more control over her powers until the very ending, which, for what this movie is, you cannot deny that it has one of the most epic ending sequences ever. Like, it absolutely rules. They're pretty much just out in this massive, they're in the yard of, the hospital where they're keeping Charlie at, and of course she gets out, and they're trying to capture her, but she just starts raining fire on them. Like, it's such an epic conclusion. There's fire just everywhere. She's shooting down fireballs, like they're shooting bullets at her, and she's literally exploding the bullets in, the air while they're firing at her. She is such an awesome character. She is possibly my favorite kid character in all of horror, because she's this 8-year-old girl who is just absolutely butchering all of these people who are trying to, take advantage of her powers. And it is so awesome. Not only that, but I just think that all the other stuff in this movie is pretty compelling as well. Not absolutely everything, but I mean, just, for example, the sequence at the old folks' house when, they're just hanging out because they need a place to rest. And of course, Rainbird and his goons show up, and Charlie just puts an end to it by absolutely just burning all of them and exploding them all. It's an epic movie. It's a great popcorn flick, I guess you can say, if you just want to watch this 8-year-old girl burn everybody that tries to do her harm. It's amazing. So for me, Firestarter is going to be number 7.
Number 7, It, Chapter 1 and 2. Alright, so technically these are 2 separate movies, but whatever, I do what I want. Get off my back, shit. While the OG It screen adaptation from 1990 is considered a classic, it's not actually a movie, it's a 2-part TV miniseries, so that version couldn't make this list. But honestly, and this may not be a very popular opinion, I prefer the 2017 and 2019 movies anyway. I saw both of these movies by myself in nearly empty theaters. I believe that is what is known as master dating. And I was enthralled both times. The massive cast is full of spectacular performers. The mood is intense and sinister. The soundtrack and score are perfect, and the special effects are insane. It's just an overall kick-ass experience. While I wasn't sure about Skarsgård being cast as Pennywise, he gave a hell of a performance, and dare I say, he even gave Tim Curry a run for his money. While the two movies don't necessarily follow the book to a T, the screenwriters did justice to King's original novel, which is no small task considering just how massive it is.
Coming in at number 6 is going to be It. Now, I struggle between the original or the remake, of course, between which It movie I want to put on this list, because of course It is probably Stephen King's, or at least one of Stephen King's most recognizable stories. But I went with the original because the remake, it's a little bit goofy at times. You know, big CGI boogly woogly painting lady coming out of the, painting and jumping at the screen, and there's the one dude who's, lumbering around outside with, "Here you go, Eddie, here's your," he doesn't actually say this, but "Here's your medicine, Eddie," freaking running away. Like, it's a little bit goofy. But the original, I think, succeeds in making Pennywise creepy, because it realized something that I don't think the remake did, and that is that the reason why Pennywise is creepy is because he's supposed to be a funny clown. He's not supposed to be a scary clown. He's supposed to be this fun dude. "Hiya, Georgie!" A fun dude, a fun clown that kids would want to come up to, so he lures them in with the clown persona, and then he jumps on them, which is something that the remake, in the remake, the clown's just creepy from the get-go, jumping out of paintings and jumping out of the projector and stuff. But the original, I just think, is awesome. Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise is fantastic. It is one of the most iconic performances in horror history, and for a reason. I think that all the kids are great here, and although it does get a little bit hokey and it does fall apart a little bit towards the end there, I just think that the original stretch of this movie, like we'll say episode 1, because it's a 2-part miniseries, episode 1 is just good enough to carry episode 2 to the heights that it reaches, I guess, if that makes any sense. So, for me, I think that, of course, if you're going to do a list like this, it has to be on there, and for me, I think it's the original. I think that the original takes the spot here.
Number 6, Stand By Me. Alright, so I'm willing to admit that a great deal of why I love this movie is the feelings of nostalgia I hold for it. And not for the movie itself, but for the way it reminds me of my own life and adolescence, for the way it makes me think of the good old days that perhaps weren't always good, but that nostalgic fondness is there regardless. While Stand By Me is in some ways a light-hearted love letter to the past, there is a coming-of-age, end-of-innocence journey taking place that is equal parts depressing and touching. There's an acknowledgement that these relationships, these seemingly unbreakable bonds we make as children, aren't meant to last. There's a relatability to this movie that a lot of King movies just can't capture. I mean, as someone who has never had to save a town from vampires or had psychokinetic powers or been abducted by a cult of religious fanatic children, a lot of King stories and movies just don't feel all that personal. And that's fine. I love reading fiction so I can explore ideas and experiences I'll likely, hopefully, never have. But in many ways, Stand By Me feels like a window into my own childhood, and through this filter I can see the good times and the bad without the rose-colored glasses and appreciate those formative memories for what they are. Much like The Shawshank Redemption, this movie brought King's work to audiences who otherwise wouldn't have given King a second thought. And while I'm a huge horror movie fan, Stand By Me isn't an unwelcome change of pace.
Coming in at number 5 is going to be Christine. I think the reason why this movie is on here is because it is one of the creepiest and best done slow burn Stephen King adaptations, despite the fact that it's about something as goofy as a killer car. But if you're gonna have, a movie where John Carpenter directs Stephen King's work, no matter what it is, it's gonna turn out pretty good, and we know this because Christine is a movie about a killer car, and it's just so creepy and compelling, and the slow burn and the slow change in the main character Artie from this like dork who gets bullied by all of these bigger guys in his school before, finding Christine, and then Christine slowly starts to turn him, and he slowly starts to go more and more insane as Christine slowly starts to reveal the fact that she also has a consciousness. And then you get some of the coolest practical effects in all of 80s horror when Christine, finally she gets smashed by the bullies, and then it's honestly one of my favorite scenes of all time, like legit top 20, when Artie is in this factory where Christine is, and he just goes, "Show me," and Christine's lights blare at him, and then she starts to fix herself by herself, even though she's a car, and then they start going around and killing all the bullies in some of the most ridiculous ways possible. Like, they blow up a gas station and Christine is literally on fire chasing this kid down the road. It's so cool. It's legitimately one of the coolest horror movies ever made, and it's honestly, it's so good. Like, it's so good. And honestly, if you haven't seen Christine, I 100% recommend you check it out. It's one of the best Stephen King adaptations, and it's honestly one of John Carpenter's best movies too. So for me, Christine comes in at number 5.
Number 5, Carrie. Carrie was the first King movie, and it set a high bar for the King films that followed in its wake. Directed by Brian De Palma with a killer score by Pino Donaggio and starring the absolute legend Sissy Spacek, Carrie is easily one of the greatest, most important, critically acclaimed horror movies of all time. Sissy Spacek is absolutely iconic in the role of Carrie White, just chewing up the scenery and spitting it out with her dynamic performance. Spacek's intensity is truly captivating, and the cinematography during the prom night scene is equal parts horrifying and beautiful. When Carrie, covered in blood and surrounded in fire, ascends into her true form, it is a sight to behold. She is a being of inimitable power who refuses to tolerate her abusers any longer. There's something satisfying about the character arc of Carrie White, the underdog, the victim of years of abuse, overcoming her fear and pain and realizing her full potential, damning all who stand in her way. And while the film has moments that may seem dated, for the most part, it holds up to scrutiny all these years later.
At number 4 is going to be Dr. Sleep. Now, this movie, the fact that it's on this list is just, it's just mind-blowing, because it's a sequel that came out 40 years after the original Shining, which of course is also a Stephen King adaptation. 40 years later, and it manages to hold up as a good sequel, like as a solid follow-up to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Like, how the hell is that possible? Not only that, but it's also adapting a book that is so different from the movie The Shining. It's supposed to be adapting a book that is pretty much completely different from the movie that it's trying to follow up, while also trying to please Stephen King, who didn't like the original Shining. And it's amazing. I mean, like, let's look at the track record of, Stephen King, I guess you could call them legacy sequels. Let's look. The Rage Carrie 2. Firestarter Rekindled. Creepshow 3. Those are the other follow-ups to Stephen King movies that came out years and years and years after the original. And yeah, we all know about those movies, but Dr. Sleep just manages to stand out as one of the legit most compelling movies I have ever seen. Ewan McGregor does absolutely fantastic as Danny. He starts off as an alcoholic, just like Jack was. He gets his life back together. He meets up with this kid Abra because they both have, the shining abilities. And it's such a great movie. Combine that with a top 3 all-time female villain in Rose the Hat. One of the most sadistic and messed up villains I have ever seen put to film. Her and her whole goon squad of flesh breathers, I don't know their exact term, but we'll call them that for now, are just so messed up. It's got one of the most memorable and horrible kill scenes of all time. The baseball boy scene. Those who have seen the movie know exactly what I'm talking about. And of course, the ending stretch where it's just 20 solid minutes of them touring the Overlook Hotel, going back, lighting up all the rooms. It is absolutely amazing. It is truly one of the best horror sequels ever made, and it's mind-blowing. Just the impossible movie, but they pulled it off. And this movie just proves that anything is possible. The fact that this movie is as good as it is just proves anything is possible. So for me, Dr. Sleep easily belongs on this list at number 4.
Number 4, The Shining. Stephen King himself has spoken at length about his dislike of Kubrick's film adaptation of The Shining, and at the time of its theatrical release, the critics weren't big fans either. But as time passed, there was a critical re-evaluation of The Shining, and it is now revered as a classic horror film. From what I can tell, folks had expected a fast-paced horror film, but when they were presented with a slow-burn, moody thriller, they were perhaps disappointed. But mostly due to the fact that their expectations had been subverted rather than affirmed. While King's criticisms of the film weren't unfounded, Kubrick's unconventional filming style, Jack Nicholson's intense performance, the unique soundtrack, and the overall impending doom vibes made The Shining a movie that stands on its own merits. Nicholson is iconic, as so many scenes from the movie are as well, whether it's the Grady twins, the elevator gushing a tsunami of blood. Hell, even the carpets of the Overlook Hotel have become instantly recognizable over the years. So while it feels almost blasphemous to side with Kubrick in the King-Kubrick feud, I'm afraid I'm a big fan of the film. Sorry, Steve.
At number 3, we've got Misery. Now, when I was talking about Cujo, I said that the 2 central performances made that movie as good as it was. Misery takes that formula and ups it to 20,000. Kathy Bates and James Caan are really pretty much the only 2 characters in this whole movie. There's other people running around, there's like, the sheriff and Paul's agent, but they're probably in 4 scenes in total, something like that. The entire movie is Annie Wilkes nursing back to health her favorite writer, Paul Sheldon, and slowly as the movie goes on, this man who's so disabled after a car crash that he can't even get out of bed, the dude can't walk, his legs are just completely shattered, slowly starts to piece together the fact that Annie Wilkes doesn't plan on letting him go anywhere anytime soon, because she is an absolute psychopath, and Kathy Bates' performances, it's fantastic. Like, just the way that she can switch it up from this super sweet, super nice fangirl of this book writer to just a complete psycho who can freak out about absolutely anything it's amazing. Her performance just is so great. And then combine that with some of the most just tension-filled scenes you could ever have. That scene where she's coming back with the paper and Paul's in the, doing the tour of the house. And then, she walks up on the stairs and they're, she's opening the door while Paul's getting back to his room. It's just it keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. That, and then of course you got the hobbling scene. Just the slow burn of this movie is so good. It's done so well, and this is just such a great great movie adapted from Stephen King's work. So for me, I think that it absolutely belongs on this list. Number 3.
Number 3, The Mist. This 2007 film is Frank Darabont's third King adaptation, and he knocks it out of the park with this one. Between the unconventional filming style, the understated, brooding, minimalist score, the intense performances, and the larger-than-life creature effects, it's just a banger of a movie from start to finish. Horror icons Bernie Wrightson and Greg Nicotero were involved in the creation of the interdimensional monsters lurking within the mist, and between Darabont, Wrightson, and Nicotero, you've got yourself an absolute dream team of horror movie masters. While the entire movie is bloody, violent, action-packed, and entirely enjoyable, it is the ending that really sealed the deal for me. Holy shit, this ending. I legitimately couldn't stop thinking about it for days. In King's original story, he leaves things open-ended. We don't know what happens to the remaining survivors, but in this movie, Darabont went absolutely over the top, and I honestly still can't believe how this movie ended. The fact that the studio allowed this ending to make the final cut is unbelievable, but I am so grateful that it did. It's genuinely the best ending to any King movie. You just don't see it coming, and it's horrific in a somehow satisfying way.
So for those who have followed my channel for any amount of time, you pretty much already know my top 2 picks. And for those of you who this is their first video, you could probably guess them anyways. I mean, like, just look around. My number 2 pick is gonna be Carrie. I love this movie. This is my second favorite horror movie of all time. Second only to my number 1 pick on this list. It's so good. King himself admits that this movie is legitimately better than the book itself. And the book I have read, the book is great, but the movie just blows everything out of the water. There's tons of Carrie, content adaptations out there. Not a single one of them hold a candle to this movie because it is unbelievably good. The score, I think, is probably the best score in horror movie history. I legit believe that. It's got such an amazing performance by Sissy Spacek as Carrie. The absolute perfect casting. You could not have casted a better person to play the role of Carrie. The directing, just everything about this movie is amazing. I don't think that this movie has any flaws. I'm gonna be honest, this movie is just flawless. Carrie is fantastic, and the ending, oh my god, the whole movie Carrie's getting bullied, and she slowly starts to learn more about her telekinetic abilities and how to use them. And then at the ending, when she just wreaks havoc over her entire school, all of her bullies just up in flames as she just ruins everybody, and then goes home, and then you get, of course, the ending scene with her and her mother. It's a beautiful movie. It legitimately is. It's the greatest revenge story of all time. It's a top 5 all-time favorite movie for me. It's my second favorite horror movie, and it's perfect. This is one that if you've never seen, I need you to watch it because there's really nothing like it. And for me, Carrie comes in at number 2.
Number 2, Christine. This movie saw 2 horror juggernauts teaming up for the first and last time, with Stephen King's 1983 novel Christine being adapted for the big screen by legendary director John Carpenter. Despite having a cast of mostly unknown actors, the performances are great. The soundtrack and score are fantastic, with George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone kicking things off in style. The practical effects are inventive and effective, with the 58 Plymouth Fury becoming a character all its own. The screenplay manages to mostly stick to the source material, which isn't necessarily imperative when adapting a King story, but it's Carpenter's direction and camera work that really sell the menace of the killer car. The scene where Christine is barreling along after Buddy Repperton while engulfed in flames is truly a sight to behold. and is one of my favorite scenes from any movie of all time.
But my number one pick, yes, it's predictable, yes, it's a cliche answer, but it's predictable and cliche for a reason because it is truly, in my opinion, the greatest movie ever made, The Shining. It is, like, words cannot describe how good this movie is. You just have to watch it for yourself. I think that this right here, despite the fact that it barely follows, like, at all, the actual book, The Shining, like, it's almost like Stanley Kubrick just read the back cover and made the movie off of that. It is just a completely mind-blowing experience. When you watch it for the first time, I was blown away. And then the more you watch this movie, the more you start to pick up on stuff, because Stanley Kubrick was such a great director that every single shot in every single frame of this movie, there's meaning behind it. There's a reason why everything is there, and you start to notice things that he did to mess with you psychologically. Like, for example, there's scenes where in the background there's a chair, and then it cuts to another shot, and then it cuts back, and the chair is gone, because it messes with you psychologically. It's so good. Like, again, just I standing here with my, like, probably 3 minutes maximum time to talk about this movie, to not waste you guys' time. I can't talk, I can't say enough. Like, I could do a whole hour-long review of this movie and it still wouldn't be enough to cover the greatness of this movie and just how it's transcended horror, transcended almost cinema in general. The Shining's imagery is everywhere, and it's such a unique movie, such a unique viewing experience. There's absolutely nothing like it. And in my opinion, it is the greatest movie of all time, the greatest horror movie of all time, and I think it is the greatest Stephen King movie adaptation of all time.
Number 1, Dr. Sleep. This is my number 1 pick due entirely to the fact that screenwriter and director Mike Flanagan found a way to take 2 of King's novels and a classic horror film and tied them all together in a genuinely baffling way. Flanagan used The Shining, both the book and the movie, as well as King's novel Dr. Sleep, to tell a story that blends everything together in a way that was very satisfying for me. Now, I'm willing to admit that had I not read The Shining and Dr. Sleep and watched Kubrick's film all before watching this movie, it may not have been quite as impressive as it was for me, but only because Flanagan's vision requires you to be intimately familiar with all of them for a full appreciation of Dr. Sleep. But after experiencing everything Flanagan based the movie on immediately before watching Dr. Sleep, getting to see how he weaves all the threads together is really rewarding. Honestly, I've never seen anything quite like it before or since. On top of all that, getting to revisit the character of Danny Torrance, as performed by the always fantastic Ewan McGregor, is a constant reader's wet dream come true. And while the movie didn't do great at the box office, anyone who is willing to take the time to familiarize themselves with the various source materials before watching Dr. Sleep is sure to be blown away, just like I was. This one is for the true King stans and can only be fully appreciated if you're willing to read The Shining and Dr. Sleep and watch Kubrick's The Shining beforehand. Alright, that's my top 10 favorite King movies. Thanks again for having me on the channel, James. It was great to work with you, and I look forward to doing it again soon. Please check out my channel, A Great Undertaking, and give me a sub if you like what you see. Okay, goodbye.
So thank you for watching our lists of the top 10 greatest Stephen King movies. Let me know your list in the comments down below. This is definitely going to be an interesting one because there are lots of Stephen King adaptations out there. So I'm excited to see what you guys have to come up with in the comments. So let me know. You can subscribe to my channel if you would like to, and I definitely implore you to go check out a great undertaking if you haven't already, because he has some of the most entertaining videos, the most entertaining movie reviews, book reviews, Stephen King reviews that you could ever find, and he's a super underrated channel. So definitely, I want you guys to go check his channel out. Do me a favor on that one. You can follow me on Instagram at James from WannaPlay. But until next time, I want to thank you guys all for watching this video. Goodbye and good night.